Many people today stand on platforms and say that God has called them. Many claim to have heard His voice. Many speak boldly in His name. But not all of them carry the weight of spiritual authenticity. Not all of them understand what it means to be chosen by God, not by personal ambition or emotional excitement. This is one of the reasons I share my background. It is not to entertain anyone. It is not to glorify darkness. It is to show that the calling of God is not a small matter. It is a journey shaped by battles, obedience, and surrender. You see, midway through my early years, the ceremonies increased in intensity. The initiations became more serious. The sacrifices became more frequent. There were certain periods where the ceremonies lasted days, involving chanting, movements, and symbolic acts that I did not understand. The adults kept saying the spirits were preparing me, guiding me, and preserving me. But I didn't know what they meant. And even though I didn't understand, an early fear began to take hold. It wasn't fear of the rituals themselves. It was fear of not knowing why they were done. It was fear of being involved in something invisible and powerful. But because I was young, I didn't have the strength to ask questions. I accepted everything silently. The more I grew, the heavier the expectations became. People made it clear that they believed I was not like other children. They watched me closely, as if they were waiting for something to manifest. The ceremonies around the trees continued, and my body carried marks of rituals I did not choose. The older I became, the more I realized that my path had already been shaped before I could make any choices. I did not know how deep these rituals would go. I did not know they were preparing me for a future I did not want. But at that time, all I knew was that I was trapped in a spiritual journey I didn't understand. And if innocence is exposed to hidden rituals, does that innocence survive, or does it slowly disappear with each ceremony? Because the deeper I went into childhood, the more the spiritual expectations increased, and the closer I came to the moment where darkness would try to claim me completely. What if, after years of being surrounded by darkness, a single moment of light appeared and changed the entire direction of your life? What if everything that was planned for you in the hidden world suddenly began to fall apart because of one unexpected encounter? This is how my journey into salvation began. It didn't start with understanding. It didn't start with desire. It started with a simple decision to follow a friend to a night prayer service, something I never imagined would become the turning point of my life. For many years, I lived with no idea that there could be another path besides the one my family had placed me on. All I knew were the sacrifices, the rituals, and the expectations. But as I entered my teenage years, something inside me grew restless. I didn't know what it was. I just felt a pull to search for something different, something that did not come from the trees or the sacrifices. Even though I didn't know God yet, I could feel that something beyond my family's traditions was calling me. So when some friends invited me to attend a night prayer service at a church, I went without knowing what to expect. I simply wanted to be in a different environment. I wanted to feel something new. What I didn't know was that this simple decision would open a new spiritual chapter one never thought possible. The thing is, when I entered the prayer meeting, I did not understand anything. People were praying passionately. Others were worshiping with deep emotion. I had never seen anything like it. Everything felt strange to me, yet I was not uncomfortable. I felt something unusual in the atmosphere, something peaceful, something clean. It was the first time in my life that I sensed a spiritual presence that did not feel heavy or frightening. As the night continued, people around me worshipped, cried, prayed, and lifted their hands. I stood quietly, trying to understand what they were experiencing. And in the middle of that moment, something happened that changed everything. I heard a voice. Not an external voice. Not a whisper from someone near me. It was a voice inside my heart, clear and unmistakable. It was the first time I ever heard something speak directly to me in a way I could not deny. The voice was calm, firm, and purposeful. It told me to leave the place where I was standing. It told me there was somewhere I needed to go. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know voices like that even existed in the spiritual world outside of rituals. But the voice came again, this time guiding me toward a different direction. I followed it because something in me knew it was not the same kind of voice I had heard in rituals. This one carried peace. I stepped out of the prayer meeting and found myself standing outside under the night sky. I looked around, confused. Then the voice led me further, guiding me toward another church in the area. At that time, the church was still in a simple shelter they had just moved into. I didn't know anything about the place. I didn't know anyone inside. Yet the voice told me that this was where I belonged. As I entered the compound, worship was going on. People were singing with passion and joy. The atmosphere was full of life. I sat at the back, unsure of what I had walked into. But as I listened, something in my heart opened. For the first time, I felt a connection to something greater than myself, something that did not demand sacrifices, blood, or rituals. It felt like peace was touching my soul directly. That night, I encountered a man who would become my destiny mentor. I didn't know him personally. I had only seen him from a distance once before in an open-air meeting. But when he began to minister, something in me recognized that this was the person the voice had spoken about. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't excitement. It was a deep sense that my steps had been guided for a purpose. And from that day, my journey into salvation began. I started attending the church consistently. I listened, observed, and learned. The desire to know God grew stronger each day. Eventually, I gave my life to Christ fully, not because I felt forced, but because something inside me knew I had found the right path. That decision marked the first time in my life that I willingly chose a spiritual direction. It was no longer about rituals others forced on me. It was a personal decision to walk away from the world I had grown up in. Soon after giving my life to Christ, my mentor introduced me to a lifestyle I had never seen before, fasting. He taught me the importance of seeking God through sacrifice, not physical sacrifice like the ones I knew from childhood, but spiritual discipline. I began to follow him, learning how to pray, how to study, and how to separate myself from the world I had known. The first fasting experience lasted several days without food or water. It was challenging, but it changed me. It broke certain patterns inside me that had been formed through years of exposure to dark rituals. It opened my spiritual eyes. It awakened something new. Through fasting, I began to feel lighter, not physically, but spiritually. I felt like chains I didn't know I carried were loosening. My thoughts became clearer. My fears became weaker. My hunger for God grew stronger. I didn't understand everything, but I knew I was being washed from the inside. Discipleship followed. I spent time in the church learning from others. I joined prayer moments. I listened to teachings about faith, holiness, and the presence of God. The more I learned, the more I realized how different this path was from the one my family had placed me on. There were no secret rituals. No hidden demands. No sacrifices of animals. No fear. Just spiritual growth and transformation. Midway through that early spiritual journey, another question formed in my heart, one that shaped my understanding of everything. How can a person touched by darkness so early in life suddenly feel drawn to a completely different spiritual world? The answer became clearer as weeks passed. The presence I felt when I gave my life to Christ was different from anything I had known. It was gentle, yet powerful. Quiet, yet life-changing. It did not demand fear, it brought freedom. And for the first time, I felt like I had stepped into a world where I was not owned, not controlled, and not marked. A world where I could choose who I wanted to become. A world where my identity was not tied to sacrifices or spirits. A world where God's voice, not the voice of rituals, guided me. But this new journey didn't erase the past. It only began to break its influence. The path ahead of me was still full of challenges. Darkness did not simply let me go. It had plans for my life. And salvation did not automatically end the spiritual claim that had been laid on me since birth. You see, if God decides to intervene in a person's life, no darkness, no matter how early the claim, can stop his light from redirecting their path. This understanding led me directly into where the clash between my past and my new faith became stronger, and where the spiritual fight for my life fully began. What happens when two spiritual worlds collide inside one person's life? What happens when the part of darkness you were born into refuses to let you go, even after you finally discover the light? This was the moment when my life moved from quiet spiritual awakening to open spiritual warfare. I had just begun my new journey with God, but the world I left behind was not ready to release me. It came back through the people I loved, the family that raised me, and the traditions that shaped my childhood. After giving my life to Christ and beginning my discipleship, I felt a new strength inside me, just like I said earlier. I felt grounded. I felt protected. But just when I thought I had left the past behind, my sister came home with news that shook me deeply. The clan had arranged a gathering in the village. They had planned a ceremony linked to the same spirits that had claimed me since birth. It was a dedication ritual meant to renew the covenant they believed existed between me and the spiritual world. When I heard that the ceremony was already organized, fear rose inside me. My family believed that I could not refuse. They believed refusing would bring severe consequences. In their minds, my destiny had already been decided, and saying no to the ritual would bring punishment. My sister insisted that refusing would bring madness. She told me that no one escapes these ceremonies, especially not someone who had been claimed before birth. To her, I had no choice but to obey. But inside me, everything resisted. I had just found a new path. I had tasted freedom. I had felt the presence of God. And I knew I could not go back into the rituals. Still, the fear was real. The pressure was heavy. And I began to wonder what would happen if I refused. This fear pushed me to run back to my mentor who had been guiding me. I needed direction. I needed clarity. I needed to know if my new faith could protect me from the spiritual forces my family feared. When I went to him, he taught me something that became one of the most important lessons of my early Christian journey. He taught me to bind the spirits that were pursuing me. He taught me that God in me was stronger than the forces outside. It was a simple instruction, but it gave me courage to go home without fear. And when I returned home, I began doing exactly what I had learned. Every day, I prayed. I bound the spirits. I declared that their influence over me was broken. I didn't fully understand everything I was saying, but I followed the instruction with faith. Something inside me believed this was my only protection. During that same period, something unexpected happened. My sister, the same one who had told me about the clan gathering, also gave her life to Christ. Then another sister followed. Suddenly, there were 3 of us standing on a new path, and the spiritual atmosphere in our home began to shift. But the shift did not come without a fight. You see, one night, we gathered to pray. We were inspired by a teaching we heard earlier in church. We wanted to fast and pray for a fresh outpouring of the Holy Spirit. We didn't know that the moment we started praying, a spiritual battle would break out in our own house. As we prayed, the air in the room changed. The atmosphere grew heavier. Something unseen began to move. And suddenly, the spirits my family had served for years manifested through my 2 sisters. Their behavior changed instantly. They began screaming, running, and shouting uncontrollably. It was a frightening moment. The fear that rose in me was like nothing I had felt before. But this was the moment when everything I had learned in church became real. I remembered the teachings about authority. I remembered the instructions to bind the spirits. I remembered the assurance that God in me was stronger. So even though my body was shaking, I stood my ground. I began to pray with everything I had. I used every word I had learned, even though I did not fully understand them. This became my first real experience of casting out demons. I had seen others do it, but I had never done it myself. Watching it happen through my sisters was both terrifying and eye-opening. I felt the clash of 2 worlds happening right in front of me, darkness fighting to keep control, and light pushing back with force. The battle went on for hours. My voice grew tired. My body felt weak. But something inside me kept pushing. I refused to give up. I refused to let the spirits win. And eventually, the atmosphere shifted. The screaming stopped. The strange movements ended. The heaviness that had filled the house lifted. One by one, the demons left. And that night marked a turning point in my spiritual life. For the first time, I saw the power of God working through me. For the first time, I understood that my salvation was not just a belief, it was a force. It was protection. It was authority. And it was stronger than everything that had been planted in my life since birth. You see, the next day, we went to church for a service. During that service, something happened that completely changed the direction of my walk with God. We received the Holy Spirit. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It was simply God filling us with strength and clarity. Suddenly, the fear of spirits disappeared. The confusion that had followed me since childhood faded. The doubts that once controlled my decisions lost their grip. Receiving the Holy Spirit brought a new sense of identity. I realized for the first time that I didn't belong to the darkness. I wasn't the child they had claimed. I wasn't the spokesman they had prepared. I was someone God had chosen long before I understood anything. But you see, midway through this transformation, a strong question formed in my heart: how can darkness hold on to a person when the light of God begins to rise inside them? This question stayed with me because I saw what light could do. It broke the fear that once ruled my home. It exposed the lies that my family had believed all their lives. It brought freedom to me and my sisters. And it proved that the spiritual world I grew up fearing was not more powerful than the God I had just encountered. Still, the battle did not end that night. Darkness does not give up easily. The enemy does not step back quietly. But something inside me had changed. I now had strength. I had knowledge. I had a new foundation. And even though the journey ahead still held challenges, I no longer walked in fear. I want to ask you, when two worlds fight for the same life, which one wins, the one that claimed you at birth, or the one that calls you into freedom? The path and purpose God had planned for me since the beginning began to unfold. I came to understand that everything I survived, every battle, every attack, every strange experience, was preparing me for a purpose I did not see coming. You see, the journey I thought was meant to destroy me was the same journey God used to shape me into who I was meant to become. That is the realization that sits at the center of my story, and it is the reason I share this part of my life today. Looking back now, I understand something I never understood as a child: God had His eye on me long before I knew who He was. Even when darkness tried to claim me before birth, God had already marked my path. Even when I was placed in rituals, He was watching. Even when I carried fear and confusion, He was waiting for the right moment to pull me out. And that is why I begin this reflection by identifying who I am, not by the things people expected me to be, but by what God has made me. I am someone who was claimed by darkness but rescued by light. I am someone who grew up surrounded by rituals, sacrifices, and spiritual marks, yet ended up walking in freedom. I am someone who did not choose his own path, yet found himself walking in the destiny God ordained. And above all, I am someone who learned, through experience and not theory, that no force, no spirit, no ancestral claim is greater than the call of God. Many people today stand on platforms and say that God has called them. Many claim to have heard His voice. Many speak boldly in His name. But not all of them carry the weight of spiritual authenticity. Not all of them understand what it means to be chosen by God, not by personal ambition or emotional excitement. This is one of the reasons I share my background. It is not to entertain anyone. It is not to glorify darkness. It is to show that the calling of God is not a small matter. It is a journey shaped by battles, obedience, and surrender. When God calls a person, He prepares them long before the world sees them. The preparation may come through hardship, rejection, spiritual battles, or unexpected turns. In my case, the preparation came through a clash between two spiritual kingdoms. And the only reason I survived is because God Himself guided every step, even when I didn't know He was guiding me. The truth is, when God calls someone, the journey is not built on convenience. It is not built on ambition. It is built on surrender. It is built on brokenness. It is built on obedience. And it is always confirmed by God's direction, not human approval. I have seen people claim God spoke when God said nothing. I have seen men force spiritual authority without spiritual foundation. I have seen people misuse the phrase God said to control others, gain influence, or avoid responsibility. This is why I emphasize spiritual authenticity. Anyone can talk. Anyone can quote scripture. Anyone can stand on a stage. But only those truly guided by God carry the weight of His presence. My story is not a story of someone who woke up one day and decided to serve God. It is not a story of someone who admired ministry and pursued it out of excitement. I did not call myself. I did not choose anything. I did not even know what ministry was when God began guiding me. He directed my steps from the very beginning. He took me from darkness into light. He shaped me through experiences that I never asked for. And the more I reflect on my journey, the more I realize that every moment, even the painful ones, played a role in forming the person I became. The witch doctor's prophecy, the early rituals, the sacrifices, the fear, the confusion, the unexpected salvation, the spiritual battles, all of it created a foundation that God would later build upon. It is easy to admire a finished work. It is easy to see a minister, a leader, or a preacher and assume their life has always looked that way. But behind every authentic calling is a story, usually a story of struggle, separation, and transformation. My life is one of those stories. A story that shows that God does not choose people because they are perfect, He chooses them because He sees what others do not see. As I continued in ministry, I saw how God opened doors I never imagined. I saw how He guided me into assignments I never planned for. I saw how He connected me to nations, people, and opportunities one never sought. And with every step, I understood more clearly that my journey was not man-made. It was God-ordained. But here is a question that stands at the center of everything: why does God choose certain people, and why does He reveal their purpose in such unusual ways? I believe the answer is this: because God sees beyond our present. He sees beyond our background. He sees beyond our limitations. And He knows exactly what role each person must play in His plan. He prepares some through peaceful journeys and others through battles, but the purpose remains the same: to reveal His power, His authority, and His love to the world. In my case, God used the same darkness that tried to destroy me as the foundation for my understanding of spiritual warfare. He used my pain to shape my authority. He used my confusion to teach me wisdom. He used my early exposure to spiritual forces to prepare me for a future in which I would confront those same forces, not as a victim but as a vessel of His power. As I reflect on everything, I want to make one truth clear: I did not bring myself into this calling. God brought me. I did not choose my assignment. God chose it. I did not build the path. God directed it. And from the very first week of my salvation, He began guiding my footsteps with precision. Even now, as I speak to people, teach, or share my testimony, I do so from a place of humility. I know where I came from. I know what tried to claim me. I know the dangers I escaped. And I know the one who delivered me. Every miracle, every open door, every spiritual battle won, none of it was done by my strength. It was God working through me from the beginning. My life is proof that God's call is supreme, His choice is final, and His purpose cannot be stopped, no matter how early darkness tries to interfere.
As you have heard, this story is not just about a man who escaped darkness. It is a reminder of how powerful spiritual decisions can be, especially when they are made before a person even understands life. His journey shows us that darkness is real, spiritual battles are real, and the enemy does not wait until someone is grown before trying to lay claim on their future. But this story also reveals something greater. It shows that no matter how deeply darkness tries to hold someone, God's light is stronger. It shows that a life marked by confusion, fear, or spiritual bondage can still be transformed completely when God steps in. It shows that a destiny the enemy tries to steal can still be restored when a person turns to Christ. As we reflect on everything shared, one clear lesson stands out: do not play with the occult. Do not open doors you cannot close. Do not entertain spiritual practices you do not understand. Darkness does not give gifts, it only takes. It takes peace, it takes identity, it takes purpose, and sometimes it takes life itself. Many people enter these things out of curiosity, desperation, or ignorance, but the price is always higher than they expect. This story is also a warning to families. Many children today are exposed to spiritual practices they never asked for. Some are taken to shrines. Some are dedicated to spirits. Some are involved in rituals without understanding what those actions mean. But the truth is simple: spiritual decisions made over a child will follow that child until God intervenes. At the same time, this testimony reminds us that God's love is powerful enough to break any covenant, any initiation, any spiritual tie, and any generational pattern. His power does not fear darkness. His presence is not intimidated by the enemy. His calling is not weakened by a person's past. And his plan for a life remains valid even when everything seems damaged. If you are listening today and you feel trapped by your past, if you are carrying fear, guilt, or spiritual baggage, if you have been involved in things you regret, if your family dedicated you to something you never agreed to, or if you simply feel far from God, there is hope, there is freedom, and there is a path out. God is not waiting for perfect people. He is waiting for willing people. He is waiting for hearts that are ready to let go of darkness and embrace His light. Just like the man in this story, your life can change. Your journey can shift. Your identity can be restored. You do not have to continue in bondage. You do not have to fear curses, rituals, or spiritual attacks. When you surrender to Jesus, He becomes your protection, your identity, and your strength. And as you make that decision, remember one thing: be careful with anyone who claims God said without the fruit to prove it. The world is full of people who speak for God without being sent. True calling is confirmed by integrity, consistency, humility, and spiritual authenticity, not excitement, manipulation, or loud declarations. Today, you have heard a real story from someone who lived through both sides, darkness and light. And his life proves something important: God still rescues. God still calls. God still delivers. And God still directs the steps of those who surrender to Him. If this story touched you, don't end it here. Turn to God today. Ask Him to guide your steps. Invite Him into your life. Let Him break every chain. And trust Him to lead you into the future He has prepared for you. Because at the end of the day, no matter how deep the darkness was, light wins. Every time. We will meet again.